Good evening. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting as follows. Town council members, designated staff, invited presenters, and members of the press may attend in person or remotely. Public access to this meeting will be limited to joining the meeting as follows. Limited number of persons, public attendees will be permitted based upon the reduced capacity of the meeting room pursuant to the governor's executive orders. Any member of the public wishing to attend in person must email meeting@monroect.org at least 24 hours in advance. You'll be notified as to whether or not space is available. All members of the public may attend remotely as follows, via computer, or via phone. So let's please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, with some people at home and some people here, I'll do the roll call both ways. So looking for Dee Dee, I see. Jen, I see. Jason is up there. Terry. Yep, I can see you, which is good. Terry Rooney? Not yet. John Formicheller, I see. Tony, I see. Sean, I see. Kevin?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great. So we're just looking for Terry, and myself, Enid, I'm here. So,
I'm here. I must have been on mute. Sorry, Madam Chair. Terry Rooney here.
Okay, perfect. So we're votes will be 9-0. Okay, going on, after we've done this. Public participation. Would anybody like to participate? Public? So we don't hear anybody, correct? I don't see anybody. All right, going on to the budget workshop with departments. How we're starting this, I have a list of, for the public, I have a list of which meeting, which department heads, which department, and the tab and the page. So getting started, Monroe, Stepney, and Stevenson Fire Departments, it's on tab 26, and it's page 135. So I'll give you a minute to find that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think the narrative for the three departments speaks for themselves. I commend them for continue to implement various aspects of the strategic plan and work in greater and greater collaboration, as evidenced by the narrative. All three departments came in with a very small adjustment to their operating expenses. With that, I will just let the chief here for council to ask any questions they wish to ask.
Okay, any questions for the fire department? Let's do one at a time. For the Monroe Fire Department, any questions from the council?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you, Jason Maurer. Thank you, Chief, for being here. I also want to echo the First Selectman's sentiment on your budget. I also felt it was an extremely reasonable budget. And in fact, the only two reasons, I only had two questions of why I wanted to call you here. One is I wanted to make sure that there was no new safety equipment or any safety equipment that you felt that you were missing at this time that you needed that was not included in your budget.
I'll speak for Monroe. I think my brother's on, but I don't know where he is.
Okay, so just introduce yourself.
Chris Fries, I'm the Vice President of Monroe Fire. All the safety equipment that we need is contemplated in our budget. The largest expenditure is actually in our capital for the following fiscal year. So with respect to general operations, we are covered.
Wonderful.
Okay,
and the second question actually goes to the capital expenditure requests. I know for Monroe, Stevenson, and Stepney each had a couple of different requests, and I just wanted to understand the priority and urgency of those requests.
We want to handle capital in this meeting or a separate meeting? I thought capital would be
We've been asked to go through the capital budget as the council during these meetings so that we have a prep for the finance meeting.
So yeah, I believe there's Stepney and Stevenson SCBA is on the capital list, as well as the Monroe mini pumper.
Page 208.
So I think the SCBA we talked about during the previous strategic planning committee meeting, and my understanding was that was to continue to convert over to the new NFPA standards for that equipment. So it's really a must-do. I know that those numbers, which there is a revision on those numbers. Heidi, looking for Heidi? Oh, thanks. So Heidi worked with, there are some new numbers based on new information. Stevenson should be reflected as 142,000 and Stepney at 354,000. They are still in the bonding column. However, my understanding is both fire departments are applying through the Assistant Firefighters grant to try to get as much. Yeah, please go right ahead.
Yeah, so
Thanks,
if you think about a capital plan, so if we talk about SCBA first, so self-contained breathing apparatus, which we wear on our backs when we're going through smoke-filled environment, so we can actually do our job. Those are governed by NFPA, so National Fire Protection Association standards, which are generally adopted in most regulations as code or law. So NFPA says that every 5 years they redo their standards, and in order to be the compliant air pack, it has to be within, newer than 10 years old and within the last 2 standards. The vast majority of air packs in the town of Monroe are rated to the 2007 NFPA standard and are either over or approaching the 10-year mark, which is why you see a bit of difference in the capital requests. You see Stepney and Stevenson with a capital request this year and Monroe next year, because that's when we hit, we'll actually be getting into our 10th year, so by the time they're procured and acquired, you're at the end of your 10th year. We did apply actually as a regional, since we are 3 separate entities, we can apply as a region. So we did apply for a regional assistance to firefighters grant, as the first selectman indicated. Obviously, there's no guarantee that that's awarded. There is a 5% cost share associated with that, along with that grant only covers certain pieces versus all pieces of that. So those grants will start getting notifications of award probably over the next 6 to 9 months. My guidance, or at least suggestion to the finance department, was that we should not take it out of capital, assuming you're going to get a grant, because the frequency of grant award is low. While we've all received grants previously, it doesn't mean we're guaranteed to get it. There's certainly fire departments across the United States that would be in even greater need for that, so we did apply for that. So that's kind of how you handle the SCBA. I think we'll get visibility as we progress down the channel, but ultimately they won't start awarding those till probably middle of summer, and then it's usually like a 6 to 9 month award window as they deplete the funding of that program. With respect to the quick attack mini pumper, I don't know if there's Chief Krag, my brother, he is on the phone. I just 2 different displays here, so I couldn't tell. He can talk about the operational necessity of a mini pumper that's on the Monroe request for $325,000. But generally speaking, that is to, as you look at volunteerism, it's all in the decline. More and more your volunteers are younger generation. Take a large fire apparatus, you got to be 21 years of age to drive that. You got to have a license to drive it. Smaller apparatus, like a mini pumper, enables someone who's 18 to actually get water to a fire. So if you're at a daytime incident or other type of incident, he's going to enable that. There are other operational characteristics of why the chief of the department and the department submitted that. He's on the phone, and I can't let him speak to the operational characteristics of why that's in our request. So Josh, I don't know if you're there. It looks like you're on mute if you are, but you can speak to that and answer that question. Still on mute if you're talking. Overall, I'll cover the piece of it, but if you look at our long-term apparatus acquisition plan, I don't know if that got submitted in the book. We did submit it. Someone else can answer that probably if it's in your book, but there's a long-term apparatus acquisition or replacement strategy in the books. If you look back history and time, the way the town has handled apparatus replacement over the last 2 have been bulk purchases. So back in 2009, 6 pieces of apparatus were purchased. Following that bulk purchase, the town council and board of finance and first selectmen at the time asked us, is it really financially the right decision to do these bulk purchases or spread them out over time to lessen the burden on taxpayers and also the necessary bonding? So we actually submitted a multi-year plan to do it phased. bring us forward to 2019. None of that plan was ever implemented by the town. So once again, we got stuck in the spot where we're gonna go out and buy 5 pieces of apparatus again in a row, redo that bulk purchase. So we have submitted a plan once again. That plan shows 2 fundamental visions. It follows, if you'd like to continue bulk purchasing, this is how it would look. Or if you'd like to begin phased purchasing over a year for apparatus, this is how it would look. Naturally, when you've done 2 large bulk purchases, kind of a decade apart, you're stuck with, if you move to phase, that you start replacing apparatus before the end of its useful life in order to get into that phased approach. So when you look at that apparatus plan for Monroe, if you look at the Monroe Fire District, we have 3 major pieces of apparatus. We have our new ladder truck that was purchased in 2019, we have the Hero, and then our 2 engines which were purchased in 2009. The long-term strategy in that plan would be to begin to look at the fleet differently. So you take those 3 pieces of apparatus and you start saying, well, can we do it with 2 large pieces of apparatus plus a mini pumper plus what we call like a straight tank or a smaller truck just with water, because there's obviously a large piece of this town that still doesn't have fire hydrants. So the mini pumper in that acquisition, the reason it's in the capital plan for this year is that when you look at the long-term capital plan for apparatus, it's slated for this year to really begin the phasing of apparatus replacements to meet the strategic objective of the department over that long-term apparatus plan. So it's hard to really look at it in silo, just that one item. You really have to understand and look at that, the entirety of the apparatus plan to look at that.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Kreis?
And just also on the capital budget, the station, Stepney, the Station 1 front ramp drainage and paving.
I think we'll wait till we get to Stephanie to answer that one. I can't talk about that.
Sure.
May I ask a question regarding,
And Mrs. Martin was,
sorry, go ahead.
and you, Ms. Aguilar.
I think Jen had her hand up first.
Okay, so Jen,
Regarding the apparatus, Mr. Selectman, is that under taking Stepney as an example, apparatus repair and maintenance? Is that what he was just talking about? Is that how we have that in the budget?
The mini pump is in the capital budget.
Apparatus repair and maintenance is strictly to annual repairs and maintenance for the current.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so
The
that's
long-term
separate.
capital plan, you would see, I don't know where the 5-year page is.
You don't have it.
You would see numbers in the millions.
Yeah, okay.
And we didn't actually model it out in our submission because we said, town, there's 2 ways you can look at it. Bulk purchasing, which probably puts you out to a large purchase. I'm going to remember, I don't have it in front of me, like maybe 2024, fiscal year 24 or 25, versus phased purchasing, where those phases start coming in a couple of years earlier. Because if you want to move to a phased plan, like I said, you need to start taking something that might have a 15-year life. On the bulk purchase, you could take those 2009 apparatus, replace all 6 at the same time, which is somewhere between 12 and 17 years of its life, depending on the type of apparatus it is. If you begin to move to phased, if you wait until that same date, all of a sudden you start purchasing 1, but then 6 years down the road, that 6th one you're replacing now 6 years past its expected useful life.
Right.
So that's why on a phase strategy, when you're moving from bulk to phase, you really got to begin to accelerate up front, which is, like I said, that's a decision that the fire department doesn't feel that's a decision we make. We need to give you what our needs are. How we actually go out and procure those assets, I think, is a decision that's not in our remit.
okay, Mrs. Martin?
Chris, you've got 1 small vehicle decrease. What did you take out of commission?
Sorry, so you're looking at my normal budget for apparatus and maintenance, why my apparatus and maintenance is lower, correct?
Yeah. Well, in an explanation for the budget decrease, it says decrease due to 1 less smaller vehicle.
Yes, so for the Monroe Fire Department, in fiscal year 21, we had 5 smaller vehicles because we were in a year of transition where we had like an overlap of 1 that was coming in and 1 that was leaving. In fiscal year 22, so we had to service both of them. In fiscal year 22, there's only 4 smaller vehicles. So there's, we have 2 chiefs, so there's 2 chiefs vehicles. And then there's what we call a utility truck. It's a pickup truck with a cap on it. And then there's like a personnel carrier. So that's like the old chief's vehicle becomes the personnel carrier. So there's 4 this year. There were 5 in the budget last year for maintenance.
Okay, so that's just for maintenance. All right, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Kreis?
Question, Madam Chair.
Jen?
Chris, this is indirectly regarding the budget. Where do you see the fire study and the results of the fire study, that was 2 years ago, I believe. When will that impact the budget? How will that impact the budget in the future? Do we see, they recommended closing firehouses. Do we see that happening?
I haven't read the fire study in quite some time, so I don't want to speak out of turn. The fire study was mainly, if I recall correctly, focused on operations versus budget. I think when they spoke about budget and looked at those types of items, it was around processes around the departments could do better consolidating purchasing and doing better to work as a team in our submissions. I think we've taken action on all those fronts. What you see this year is a consolidated narrative from the departments, consolidating what we've done, our needs and our data, where in the past you've seen separate submissions. In addition, for the last 3 budget cycles, the 3 departments have worked together through budget workshops prior to our submission to understand what the mutual needs of the departments are. So for example, looking at that SCBA purchase, we approach vendors as a consolidated group. Unfortunately, in the fire service, a lot of things are done by state bid, state contract. So whether I'm buying 1 or 1,000, it's generally the same price. So it's not quantity savings that way So when I reflect on the fire study, I think we have taken actions from a budget perspective. Like I said, I haven't read it in probably 2 years at this point. I don't recall that it had any recommendations around closing firehouses or anything like that. We do strategically always look at operationally what makes sense from an apparatus fleet. So what you've seen over the last 2 bulk purchases is fleet downsizing. So in 2009, the Monroe Fire Department went down by 1. In 2019, 18, I'm going to mess up the year there. I know Stepney went down by 1, so we have been downsizing the fleet. That helps in ongoing maintenance and apparatus costs. Or maintenance and repair costs. The other thing you always need to think about is your positioning of firehouses in the town impacts the ISO rating of the town. So we're like rated ISO 5, Mark? ISO 5. If you close firehouses, reposition apparatus, and do things like that, you could trigger an insurance services organization review. If your ISO rating changes, it's going to impact every homeowner's insurance policy in this town. So the fire study will likely you'll never see a fire study come out and say, close a firehouse or do that, because that's a lot of liability on a contracted service to come out and say something like that. It would say something like, the town may consider reviewing the placement of its fire stations based on its requisite need of the ISO rating for the town and make actions off of that. So that's, hopefully that answers your question.
It does completely. Thank you.
Anything else of Mr. Kreis and Monroe? Oh, and I should write this minute to thank Mr. Kellogg for doing such a wonderful job on the tab and the pages.
Happy to help.
Any credit from you. I sat there doing one of them, and then I read the thing, and I said, oh, he did them for us. So thank you. So Stepney, if we're going to Stepney, is on page 143.
Good evening. My name is David Lewis Jr., Chief Assessor.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Lewis?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I thank you again for coming. As I stated, I felt all of the budgets were completely in line, and I have no issues with the budgets whatsoever. I just wanted to check on the priority of the capital expenditures, as well as if there's any other equipment that you feel like you're missing that you could use that was not included in your budget.
Okay. The only thing, your answer before about the front of the firehouse, the apron, that was done back when we rebuilt the firehouse back in 1992. So that asphalt was from 1992. It's cracking, it's ruined. We also get a lot of water off of Route 25. So in that project was also strategically changing the angle of the asphalt to get it to run down Mill Street a little more and put a couple of drains in there also. So on really bad days, at the front of the firehouse, we get about 3 to 4 inches of water in the, it's not in the actual firehouse, it sits right in front of the apron. So that can ice up on us and have problems with fire trucks. So that's a priority. That definitely needs to get done. Same with our back parking lot. I think that was all included in that. It's all the same thing. It's from 1992. And with all the apparatus driving on it, it's heavy, so it cracks.
Okay.
The other one was Sorry, what was your other question about the other?
Just any other safety?
Oh,
Your
the capital,
SCBA.
the capital, yeah. The other thing was the SCBA. As Chris mentioned perfectly, our SCBA is at the end of its life. Stephanie's SCBA, we have a group of it is over in September and then October. And according to NFPA, as soon as that's out of service, you're done. We can't use it anymore. And if that's the case, they have to come off the fire truck, and the fire truck's not even a certified fire truck anymore. So unfortunately, we've pushed it as far as we can, to try to save us as much money as possible.
No, and we appreciate that, and I appreciate the candor and the answers. I think between both the presentation by Chris and yourself, we see that the capital expenditures here are necessities and priorities for this year. So I appreciate knowing that and appreciate you guys doing everything you do to keep us safe. And thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Chief Lewis? Mrs. Martin?
We had, prior to this meeting, we had a strategic planning committee meeting and talked about that in front of the parking lot area. And if we're lucky, this one might happen.
Okay. I believe the state of Connecticut was gonna be doing some work over there too, or something. I heard on Main Street, not out in front, so
Right.
hopefully that worked.
We hope.
Yeah,
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, sir.
thank you, everybody.
Going on to Stevenson Volunteer Fire Department, page 141.
Good evening. I'm John Howe. I'm the chief of Stevenson Fire Department. With me is Jeff Giordano, president.
Okay,
I presume he's going to, well.
he likes asking questions.
Fat packs.
Anybody else? Jason, do you have anything to say?
Madam Chair, I think the answers have probably been stated through the other fire departments, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've heard what we need to. So thank you for coming out, and just let us know if you have a different response, I guess.
Gotcha. Anything else of the chief? Mrs. Martin?
Yeah, just a quick question. Again, in strategic planning, we talked last year, you did those air pack things. And so those were approved last year, and about how many did those replace?
It was 15.
15, okay. And how many you're doing more this year?
Yes, it's the remainder of the fleet. There was, due to some pricing issues and changes, we weren't able to cover all the units.
And will this?
So this will
cover the rest of it?
this will complete it.
Okay, good news.
How many of those are then? How many are outstanding? I'm just curious.
I can. So,
I'm-
yeah.
Just give me the numbers.
187. So in total, from a town perspective, between Stepney, Stevenson, and Monroe, it's a replacement of 74 air packs, which is incremental to the 15 they previously did. So it's 14 for Stevenson, 35 for Stepney. In the year forward for Monroe, it's 25.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for the department? Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
While I'm here, I missed one thing. So Madam Chairwoman, if I could reapproach for Monroe. Or kick me out, whatever you want to do. I forgot because it's not in our capital plan. It's under Public Works, I think. But Public Works, sorry, still issues. Speaking of my new team here. Monroe Station 1, so 18 Sheldon Road, privately owned facility up there. As you know, there's active work going on to redo all the bids for the EMS renovation. So in the capital plan for this year, from what I've seen, there's about $200,000 for planning for the renovation that the town's going to fund at Monroe Station 1. And then I think in subsequent years, the dollars obviously that complete that. I just think that's an important piece as we understand a project is ongoing and launching. That there's a fire truck that costs $1.4 million in that station, and you certainly are going to want that inside. So you might want to, as we think about that, need to consider those in tandem. That's all I wanted to say on that, to make sure that's still a priority project and is the highest priority project for the Monroe Fire Department.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that project entertains the fact that that truck doesn't go anywhere until there's other solutions, so.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're going on to the fire marshal, who's tab 27, page 146.
So I know, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
So I don't think, I mean, I wasn't going to necessarily go through a whole lot here because I think Mr. Mauer mentioned a couple things he wanted to talk about. Mr. Davin is here anyway, wanted to be here for the prior discussion anyway, but to address the two items that Mr. Mauer brought up last night, in office expense, we did look at that, Mr. Davin. There was a concern this year that some large purchases may come up towards the end of the year relative to new state requirements, but that, as of now, some new information that does not look like that is going to happen in the current fiscal year. So we would be comfortable, or Mr. Davin would be comfortable to take perhaps $400 to $500 worth of the larger items that were planned for next year and take care of them this year, which was kind of in the spirit of what you were asking us to research at this point. So that's the first item. In the operating expense line, I believe your concern was that you felt that we had not been over $3,000 in actuals. In looking in the history, the normal range of this line fluctuates quite a bit. It's gone from $2,300 all the way up to $5,200 in the past several years. You're correct in that fiscal year 20 was under, but there are a lot of moving parts to some of these items. This year is low primarily because of some of the COVID restrictions and the lack of travel and training and things like that. So, I mean, that said, I think Mr. Davin said he might be, comfortable, shaving a small amount here off of this, but certainly I think given the normal ranges, if we go back, several years, we're kind of in the, towards the middle of what it's averaged in most years. So, so that's the feedback on that. But as Mr. Davin is here anyway, happy to talk about that further if you'd like.
Questions for Mr. Davin?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Selectman, and thank you, Mr. Davin, for talking about that before the meeting so that we have some answers. I appreciate the willingness to look at the expenses. I know we're talking about, when you're talking about the entirety of the budget, very small amounts, but those small amounts, when you add them together, add up to something, and we're trying to make sure that we're budgeting openly and honestly to our taxpayers. I think that I'm comfortable with the answers. I expect that we'll be making motions at the end of this, and in which case, based off of your expectation, I'll make a motion to just do the $500 rather than the $1,000 I proposed off of the office expenses, with the understanding that you'll be utilizing funds that are already set aside this year to counteract that. As for the operational expenses, the operating expenses, is there any room to use some of this year's budgets to pre-sign up for things for next year? And also, do you expect that, considering we are still in the state we're in when it comes to the pandemic and the emergency, that next year might also be lower, similar to this year, because of the inability to attend things, especially at the beginning of the fiscal year?
Well, a lot of the differences, of course, is because a lot of seminars weren't held this year because of the pandemic. So that's why there is a surplus line. We are all hoping on my side of the fence in the fire marshal world to get back into our live training and live seminars. So I think there could be a little wiggle room there, maybe $200. I don't know if that's going to help out or not, but again, a lot of it.
I appreciate the candor there, and if that's your feeling that you think you may be able to be back to the norm next year, at least that's the hope, then I have no problem leaving it where it is.
Thank you.
Anything else for the fire marshal? Mrs. Martin?
Mr. Gavin, your part-time people, are they 20 hours a week?
My part-time people are per diem because of the pandemic, of course. They've had childcare issues, so they haven't been. But usually, because of their full-time work schedule, they give me 1 to 2 days a week. And because of the pandemic, they haven't been working. It'll be a year in March.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Mr. David? Seeing no one, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, it's
Thank you for your time.
building.
Thank you.
Next, it's building, which is tab 21, page 103.
Okay. So, Gunnar is building official, Gunnar Gaylord, here also with our town planner, Rick Schultz, who oversees the building department as well. As I think you all know from my presentation, the largest item here is are recommending that the assistant building official position go from part-time to full-time. I think I kind of outlined in my presentation the reasons behind that relative to the increase in permit activity and really trying to make sure that we are aligned with the demand because not only is it obviously, I can't say enough. I mean, Gunnar and his team have done a remarkable job in making sure we're continuing to make the statutory deadlines to process permits. But that said, I think we all appreciate that. We want to be able to keep up with the demand and be even more timely in response. And the last thing we want to do is risk. I know Mr. Kreiz mentioned earlier the ISO rating for the town. That the building department is a huge component of that. We have a relatively high ISO rating right now, and if the building inspector FTEs are not meeting if we're not staffing to meet the demand of permit activity, that is a risk as well, as Mr. Moore has explained to me. So other than that, I don't think there's very many other major changes in their budget. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that I or these two gentlemen can answer.
Okay, questions? Mrs. Martin?
Hey, gentlemen. I know the typical answer to this question is it's been encumbered or it hasn't been used for the rest of the year. There's a huge drop in your office expenses year to date into the final, so it's $4 but the total is $5,524. What are we not doing now that we're going to do for the rest of the year?
The Codes and Standards Commission for building codes and stuff like that has been in the process to bring out a new set of codes, and we thought they were going to come out this past year, and apparently it's not going to happen. So that was just an extension for next year for those costs, because the costs are pretty astronomical. And as Bill said, we have seminars that we have to attend that have all been kind of closed down, and we'd like to get back into that online kind of training.
And so you anticipate using that money then in this fiscal year?
Not in this.
Well, in this.
Yeah.
There's about a little over $3,000 worth of code book expenditure that was budgeted for the current year that we can't spend it if we wanted to on that because the books aren't available. So
not available. They haven't figured out what codes.
Right.
So it's with Codes and Standards right now, and they're waiting. We're waiting to find out.
Right. So we anticipate that they will come under this year in their office expense line, but we're going to need those funds next year.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anything else?
Madam Chair?
Good
Yes.
question.
Thank you very much. Just continuing on that line, are there any items that you would normally just on a every year basis have to purchase, or anything that you do plan on purchasing next year that because you have such a surplus for this year, since those books didn't come out, that you think you could purchase this year and possibly cut a little bit off of your next year's budget?
Yeah, there's some office supplies and stuff like that. We go through a lot of paperwork and duplicate paperwork because of the building permits themselves and the certificate of occupancies. They all have to be. So there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of mailing, and a lot of stuff that goes out. So we have quite a bit. I don't know if we're going to need any more printers and stuff of that nature at this point in time, but.
Trying to reduce printers, not add printers. Too many as it is.
Is there a number that you'd feel comfortable putting out that you think that you could spend out of this year's office expense budget that we could then cut from next year's?
For next, yeah, I'm not sure how much that would be. I can't really give you a figure on that.
We'd have to identify some larger items like
Yeah,
filing cabinets or, I don't know.
Do you think you might be able to get us that answer to the selectmen prior to our next Monday meeting?
Sure.
That would be great. And then my only other question is regarding the part-time to full-time. In your opinion, is it better to switch this position to a full-time position, or would it be more beneficial for you to add a second part-time position?
I think you want a full-time position. I'd like to see somebody come in and can be deputized to take over in case for some reason I'm on vacation or I'm sick or for whatever reason, who's fully capable of signing the permits, the COs. And I think we need a full-time position. And one person, it's a lot easier if one person's doing most of the instructions. It has a line that carries through from beginning to end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? No? Right. Going on to emergency medical.
Thanks, guys. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, going on to medical services, tab 28, page 155.
Okay. So, Chief Smith is here. I think generally speaking, the EMS budget is status quo. The increase in contracted services is per the rates that were negotiated last year, which were pretty favorable. There were some adjustments that I made to contracted services, and that was based upon evaluating how we were budgeting relative to COVID. We're trying to ensure that COVID dollars are really captured separately, and we're not budgeting based on the pandemic, but based on normal operations. Because again, we do have sizable contingency built into the budget in a separate contingency line for COVID expenses. So with that, open it up to questions.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I'm actually gonna, thank you for coming, Mr. Smith. I'm gonna go on the lines that Jason, I'm looking at your last year-to-date as of December 31st. You have not spent any of your 2021 budget for office expense, operating expense. Is there any way to use that and have it in the budget, to use what you had last year and not have it in the budget for next year?
So I've been holding off making some purchases because of just the unknowns of what supplies I need due to COVID and stuff. I do have to make some purchases. I need to get new uniforms, jackets, other stuff that's going to hit this year.
Okay.
Specifically out of the equipment lines. So that's going to go down, but I was just holding off, as long as I can, just the unknowns of what was going on this year.
Okay.
Office expense, Gail retired. That's Gail. So Craig and I have actually been doing a lot of stuff either from work, please don't tell it, or, from home. And once we replace that position, that's going to go back up too.
Okay.
Because we're going to have to replace stuff. So that's what you're seeing with a lot of this is I'm cheap, number one, but number two, I'd like to try to hold off just because this year has just been so unpredictable for us.
Yeah.
We've stockpiled a lot of, personal protective equipment, and with the assistance of emergency management, we will get that as well. And we got that toward the end of the last fiscal year, and we've been sort of still doing that, but that's another one where we may all of a sudden get hit with having to buy some more purchases.
And that is consistent with, my directive to all the department heads to be very careful about while we're spending, while we're in the pandemic, just to make sure that, we're being as careful as possible and focusing on mission critical things, but knowing at some point there's certain things that we're going to have to go back to normal.
And I'm sure the uniforms are expensive.
Making the jackets are expensive that we buy, and nowadays even shirts and stuff can be as well. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Mauer.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. I appreciate the answers with regards to things going up and the fact that we may see some spending coming this year. That being said, even if you look back at like the 2019, 2020, and 2018, 2019 numbers, you still have come in well underneath the numbers that you've budgeted. Is there something especially great this year that we're looking at 40,000 for operating expense versus the 19,000 total that went in 2019, 2020?
Last fiscal year too, when COVID first started, which would have been last fiscal year, we saw a significant decrease in our call volume. Everybody was afraid to go to the hospital for several months. It was significant. It has
But what
now.
about the year before that?
I'd have to look back and see why we didn't spend more the year before. So I can do some research on that for you. Part of it is I do try to keep the numbers under control and watch what we're doing, but it's very unpredictable for us. We can have a very low call year, and all of a sudden we get hit and our call volume goes up, and so does our need for supplies. So it's very hard to say I'm going to use X every year, just because we don't know. And we had, like I said, last year, because of COVID, we saw that significant decrease in services. It's back up to normal now. So I do anticipate regular purchases of consumables, which is what that line item is for, will start to go back up to normal. So it's hard for me to say it's going to be X dollars. So we try to do the best we can and estimate that. And again, I try to be very frugal with our spending. And I'd rather come in under budget than have to come back to you and stand before you and say I went over. So that's why I come in with that conservative number.
Okay.
I don't recall specifically, but I thought that there was one year that you recast a lot of your expenditures as well to better categorize them. That may have changed, may have created some issues comparing some of the more than a year ago. I don't remember off the top of my head though. I'd have to go back to that unless Heidi remembers.
But I don't remember what year we ended up doing.
And then also on the cleaning expenses, the building maintenance, there's a significant increase in the cleaning expenses from the previous fiscal year to this year. Is that a change of contractor? Is that just a COVID aspect of things, or is there something else driving that increase?
All of the above. So yes, we did change to a new contractor. It went out to the town. Looked at a different contractor, so we do have that. We'll basically go off that price that the town received. Due to COVID, we increased the frequency of cleaning of the building. So we are doing it more often now than the ones we did previously. That's a better cleaning. So it was a combination of those factors that led to that increase.
And it's transition from it was a kind of a sole provider person that was doing it, as opposed to now it's a contracted service through Public Works that is more in line with the rest of our public buildings.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
On screen is up.
Under EMS training expenses, there's still money for public classes and EMS conferences. Are you still doing public classes now?
So when the pandemic started, of course, we had to stop all training. In fact, even internal training we couldn't do in person, which for us is difficult because a lot of the training is hands-on we try to do. It's not just, the classroom we can watch it PowerPoint. So for the beginning of this last fiscal year, and of course through the beginning of this fiscal year, we've been really unable to do the training that we need to do. The state has extended certification dates for us, because everybody's running the same thing. We are planning to start up some of the more in-person as some of the restrictions are lessened. And we can do that. We've run into a problem of space. Just because our current facility really can't run public classes in there anymore. We're looking at as the weather warms up, maybe we can move the vehicles out of the bays and do some public CPR classes, distanced with the masks and all the precautions in place, because they have come out with guidelines that allow us to do that now. So our hope is come spring and summer, we'll start to pick up training again to try to get back to somewhat of a norm. So yeah, we will be using some more of those funds and conducting more of the public classes that we have in the past.
But the numbers are exactly the same from last year, but obviously there's less classes, even if you anticipate some going forward.
This fiscal year, we'll see it. Hopefully by next fiscal year, we'll be back to be able to open up and get back to somewhat of a normal training regimen, at least sometime throughout that fiscal year. I'm hoping. Nobody knows at this point. It's very difficult to predict that. We're also, what's going to happen too, is we're going to have to play catch up with all our members who we've held off doing the required training with permission of the state, but we're going to have to kick that back into high gear as soon as we're able to do that. And that's going to hit those funds as well.
Going to have a larger number of individuals that are going to be due for a recert. There's going to be pent up demand as well.
Yes,
right?
Because they, like I said, they extended what the Office of Emergency Medical Service did is even those that expired, let's say January, which was a group, they've actually extended them for a year. But we're going to have to play catch up at some point and probably do double recerts, as soon as we're allowed to do that. Our plan is as soon as we can to get back into that. But as we all know, the restrictions and the guidelines change sometimes daily on what we can or can't do. So we are going to, like I said, we will be getting in and start to get back to normal and start to expend the funds that we have.
Okay, anything else? No questions? Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The library, tab 31, page 185.
So Ms. Rhines is here, obviously, to answer all any questions you have. I just want to say that I think as always, Lorna's done a very detailed job of putting her detailed expenditures together. I just want to point out, there's a lot of things that are, you'll see moving around here. I think what, Lorna continues to do, which is very admirable, is shift things based upon needs of the community. And you'll see that continue on here where she's trying to identify where things belong, right? So like this year's a prime example. She took a lot of funds that were earmarked towards more tangible borrowing assets and moved them to online and downloadables, everything, so that we're still meeting the needs of the community as they need it, this year. And you'll see more of that. So I guess let's just go right into questions, because I don't know where you guys wanted to, I can't remember who asked for library, so I don't know where you want to go.
Mrs. Aguilar?
Thank you for everything you've done. Seriously. I mean, the library really has kicked it up 1,000 times during this whole thing. I know people are so appreciative of all the online stuff. So that first, I want to thank you for that. Questions about when did the library close during COVID?
Library closed second week in March.
Second week in March, and still closed, correct?
No, well, no.
No.
Not at
When
all.
did it reopen?
We reopened in the end of, we opened for curbside service in July.
Right.
And then October, we opened back again to the public.
Okay.
So we're open up
On a limited basis.
and lower level, so that we're having people come in on whichever level that they want to, function. People have to come in and, there's like a doorbell, and they have to just make sure, we make sure they're masked and everything before they come in. But we are allowing people in for 20-minute browsing.
Okay.
And also for 45-minute computer use.
Okay. My question is, I'm looking at your salary, and I gauge things like the top salary is 54% in, that's a salary. I question how we still have so much that we are paying this year in salary. We are still 49% of the library salary when we were closed for 5 months.
Are you talking about the full-time line? The part-time line is.
The part-time line is down $58,000,
Full-time
59.
people have been working 100% of the time. So
They
even
have,
when the
okay.
library was
So they've been,
closed, my full-time staff was working full-time from home.
okay,
We were answering questions, we were planning programming, we were running programming.
okay.
You know, so we were still managing.
Okay, I only question that because there is a lot of questions online about that. We've been sent a letter on how services were closed, but we're still paying, so that's why I'm questioning.
Right.
So I don't think it's well known that the whole library staff was working.
The entire library staff was working from home, yeah.
Okay,
We were still answering, we were still answering questions. We were still renewing library cards. We were working on learning how to use Zoom and, and getting online programming up and going. We were also trying to get our online, like our downloadables ramped up.
yeah,
We were working on posting things on, upgrading our website so that people could find things online. So people were working very hard from home.
okay, awesome. And I think that you all did a commendable, amazing job. That was probably my only question. I know I look at last year's where you are this year and you're up a lot, and you can see where you're up a lot, like in library. That was my other question. Library utilities, heat. We're up in heat. We're about 60% in heat. Your heat is going.
But where we are this year?
Not heat, library utilities.
Library utilities is just,
Which line?
Is
Other utilities, other?
sorry, line 594 or 565.
Yeah, the other utilities, other.
That,
utilities other?
that's
Arian, okay, so
water.
that went up, okay.
I mean, we don't have a lot of control over that. That is
Yeah,
what it is.
it is what it is. Okay, that was it. Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done again.
Mrs. Martin? And then,
I did not have a question, but I just wanted to say that I have heard from people in the community, the one constant, good constant that remained through the community was the library.
Yeah.
And I think that's in large part credit to you and compliment you for that.
Thank you very much.
Such out of the box.
Mr. Scott?
Oh, sorry. I said, sorry, one thing. Yes, I want to reiterate what Dee Dee said. That's great. I have twin girls, and that was the closest normalcy they had when not be able to get to school is having to go to the library. So when it opened back up, it was great to be able to do so. Question I have is, looking forward, what will we learn off of this time period that we're going to take, the library will become a normal part of the library? What sections that we learn now that we're going to carry over post-COVID?
Yeah, so,
Library to
so
go.
we have learned that people love curbside delivery.
Like library to go.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is going to be something that we definitely want to carry forward, for people who are in a rush or people who have a baby crying in the car or whatever, that they'll be able to stop by and just kind of pick something up and go. We're looking into, people like the online programming. So it gives people an opportunity who maybe are working and couldn't otherwise get to the library to, in the evening, or elderly people. We found that programming during the day through Zoom for older people has been fabulous because they don't have to travel to get in. So we're going to keep the Zoom programming going, trying to figure out ways of doing that, maybe hybrid, as in, doing it both ways, doing in-house and out as well. So we're working on that. Obviously, downloadable materials have just, taken off from all this. And the big issue with that is the cost of it.
Yeah.
So we really have to, balance, because people are still taking books out. And that is always, one of the things that we're really trying to figure out, what is the balance between, what we're going to do as downloadables and what we're going to do as, available material.
Great, awesome, thank you. Yep.
Any other questions for Mrs. Rhines? Okay, I of course will echo this because I'm in the library all the time. And it's just great coming in or doing the curbside and just putting my library number in. Anything else? So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Lorna.
Next is Parks and Rec, tab 31, page 191.
So another department that's been very flexible this year and really with the help of Keith White and the rest of the team doing a phenomenal job continuing whatever programming we could possibly provide during this year. I think the budget reflects, really the goal of going back to a normal, assuming we're going to have closer to a normal season. With that, I don't know if there's really anything I want to highlight beyond that. It's a fairly small change. We are restoring the anticipated revenues to back to match with what a normal year as well, so it's offset by that. Anyway, might as well just go right to any questions you have for me or Missy.
Okay, questions from Ms. Orrs? Aguilar?
Hello. Thank you for coming. And again, thank you for, I feel like your brain is very creative. You've brought so many great programs to the town and for it. My question is the same for you. Is your salary, everybody's salary, all your workers, have they been working this whole time?
We never shut down.
Okay.
The park was open.
Okay.
The maintenance staff still had to mow, rake leaves, clean the bathrooms. My office staff, we had to answer phone calls. We were doing virtual programs. We had a magic show. We had trivia night. We had code whiz, magician. So we had contests online, the gingerbread, so.
Yeah, that was great.
We were still doing as much as we could without a home.
And with park usage down, you didn't find any cost savings in that?
Well,
because of the offset.
Programming was down, but the actual visitors to the park was dramatically increased.
True.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping as I work closely with Keith, as the sector rules come out, when we start having more people outside, and Leah, my rec supervisor, and I were gearing up to do a lot of outdoor programs because we haven't had access to indoor things.
Yeah.
So we have a whole slate. Some of you might even be getting e-blasts already with different programs coming up, and switch gears if they say we can only have a certain amount of children or adults. Ask no matter where we're getting ready to gear back up because we know we can succeed in the outside. We did it all summer long.
Yeah.
All spring, all fall. So my staff was phenomenal, being flexible and everything like that. And Ken was great. And Keith, last minute, hey, can we try this? Can we try this? And so
well, you guys did a great job. Line 920. Are you going to use your budgeted 13,000 for park improvements?
Yes, actually, I just got a PO approved for the field fencing. Right now, we're obviously the weather, can't go out there and do that. And then I have to order rust, the clay, and the grass.
Oh.
So that's something.
But isn't that in next year's budget?
We need clay and grass seed every year.
Okay.
That's just something, grass grows, it gets used, clay in the ball field. So it's just, we haven't been able to do it in the traditional time because the park was heavily used, more so times when Russ would do it, we didn't want to kick the people off the fields and stuff.
Gotcha.
So that will be spent momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Madam Chair?
Well, after Mr. Scott has.
I'll go.
Jason.
Hi, hey, Missy. Quick question on the basketball courts. Can you talk to me a little bit through those? We talked about a little bit in strategic planning today, and I know, talk to me like the vendor. Is it the same vendor that we use for the tennis courts? Just talk me through that, because I know when we did the tennis courts, I used the phrase earlier, if you build it, they will come, and I think you see that they're using the tennis courts a lot more. Pickleball has become very popular, and obviously basketball courts are already being used a lot. Just talk me through that and the two courts that you're looking to do.
Absolutely. So I don't know if in your meeting earlier, if any photos were shared with the basketball court.
They're in that
Are they
packet,
in the-
but they're kind of fuzzy though.
Okay.
So.
Oh, well, I'll pick it up after. So that's the story of the day. But anyway, so we have the 2 basketball courts at Wolf Park, and on any given warm night, kids, adults, everyone's out there. We usually do programming. We usually have our middle school basketball league, stuff like that. But the courts just are used a lot and the wear and tear. So the front court closest to the pool parking lot, if you saw, I'm sorry the pictures were fuzzy, but there's parts of the court that are just cracked and ripped up that it's not safe to have people on that front. So right now the rims are off of that. So when we do get the warm weather, I'm not putting the rims up because I'm worried about somebody getting hurt. The back court, the one closest to junior soccer A field, that has a few cracks. It has a little bit of mold. That's not as bad. But when I had RNS come out and he gave me, you'll see in your packet, there was prices to do the front court only and the back court only, or both. And we have a savings if we do both courts together. So I was hoping that we could fix this because we can even do more programming at the courts. I mean, we started a men's league last year at St. Jude and we had to stop in March, but the men were planning to play in the summer. So, you know, it's just good for programming and it's something fun. I know our day camp this year, Summer Fun Days camp, we couldn't use the Board of Ed buildings. We had to do camp outside. Kids are on the courts all the time. So I just think it's important to have a safe facility for everybody to use.
Yep. Thank you.
Anything else?
It's gonna take you longer to pick up.
Hour?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Missy, so much for coming and echoing the sentiments of all of the wonderful things that were done throughout the tough times that we had this year and certainly abnormal times that we had this past year. A couple of questions, one on the revenue side, and I wasn't sure if I misunderstood what the selectman was saying earlier. Are we bringing the revenue back down to the 100,500?
So we are, I've adjusted the revenue back to 164, which is more representative of a normal season. You have to one thing you have to remember is that the bulk of the fiscal year 21-22 fees would come in at the end of fiscal year 22 because of that's the season, right? So by then we are clearly, God willing, I mean, we're well past the restrictions and we would expect to have a full-fledged all programs on, all fees being collected kind of a year in terms of revenue.
That makes sense, and I'm glad you pointed that out. That it actually basically comes in the April timeframe of the year.
Right. They're coming in the spring at the end of the fiscal year for activity that's happening after it.
Okay. Also on a bunch of the lines, the vendor lines, the improvements, ground maintenance, equipment expense, office expense. Do you see any way on any of those lines of utilizing some of the underspending from this year because of COVID ahead of time and utilizing those funds to purchase things that would be in next year's budget?
Well, we did that a little bit with the Wolf Park, the pool chemical control board. I think we talked about it a little bit with some of the equipment stuff. Another one was just kind of reducing things down to a more average year. But Missy, if there's something else that I'm not.
The thing of it is we're heading into the spring, which is our peak season. So I'm hoping as those sector rules keep coming out, I mean, I have a full slate. I want programs to be outside. So this is the typical, April, May is when we spend that chunk. So now we're heading into the budget. I kind of need it. So I'm anticipating we're going to be back to the new normal. And you'll see those numbers going down pretty soon as the requisitions go into the finance office.
Excellent, thank you. And then one more question, just with capital expenditures. The one thing that I had a couple of constituents reach out about was that nowhere in the capital expenditures is, and we haven't seen it for a little while now, is the splash pad. Is that project now just a thing of the past? Is it something that we're still looking at for the future and just not this year? what do you feel the status of that project is?
So you want me to?
You can
I can answer that. So the splash pad project, those funds were appropriated about 5 years ago out of the Wilton fund. And in the research that Missy has done, it seems that number was literally just taken out of what was left in that fund. And Missy's concern, as I echo, is that project really doesn't have a design, a real estimate, and actually Missy really isn't sure that where it was envisioned makes the most sense. So it's definitely a project we want to do. I just don't think that right now it's ripe for consideration. And in speaking with the Parks and Rec Commission, I want to focus on priorities. And our biggest priorities are the field projects that are ongoing that have to be, we're in the process of kind of re-envisioning how that project gets done. And quite frankly, the other project that is a priority is the replacement of the playground, which we know the Playground Foundation is actively fundraising for. And as you'll note in the budget, I have a proposed appropriation of $100,000 towards that project. To be clear, that is not in any way it's not a donation to the Playground Foundation. It would be the town's contribution in terms of equipment and materials towards that project at the point in time when they were ready to go. So, so the playground, the splash pad is certainly still a viable concept, but in terms of priority, I think we need to do some more work to get a real design, a real number, and then there's always ongoing funds that, we have plenty of funds in other, there's field assessment accounts and there's program funds that are out there that, and obviously other things come up as well, grants that we could identify at the time when that project is kind of more ripe for consideration.
Excellent. Do we have an approximate time frame at all on that? And also the funds that were set aside from the Wilton fund there, those funds aren't being utilized in any of these proposed expenses, correct?
So because the Wilton funds were donated and they were donated for any use in the park, my recommendation would be that those be reallocated for active projects. So that would be the playground, that would be the field project. There were a couple other ongoing projects, the roof at the roof at Great Hollow. So all those funds want to put those towards those efforts. So we utilize that donation as intended. As far as timeline for the splash pad, I'm gonna ask Missy and the Parks and Rec Commission to kind of answer that more fully, because I think there are a lot of projects that have come up over the years. People still talk about they'd love to have a dog park in town, and I love that idea as well, but that's another thing that has to be prioritized and figured out and all that other stuff. So I think my intent is to say let's focus on a couple things and get them done and over the line, and then I look to the commission with Missy to kind of come up with a batting order of where we should go from here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the answers.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Mrs. Aguilar?
Mr. Selectman, this one is for you, actually. I'm looking at last year's budget book, and the budget for revenue last year, the final or the 2021 budget was 185,800, and then this year it lists as 85,800. Did that go down $100,000 in Board of Finance?
You're talking about the current fiscal year's original versus what's final budget?
Yes.
Yes, in the, and Ron may know the exact answer, or Heidi. So in the final Board of Finance deliberations, they reduced several revenue line items because of COVID. And I'm certain that Parks and Rec revenue was one of them. I don't know I don't know the exact final dollar amount, but Ron may have that.
Right.
I think that is correct, Ken.
Okay.
Okay,
I forget.
They did that, there was.
So much later.
EMS revenue was taken down, this was, I mean, there was a bunch of different areas that we knew the revenue wasn't gonna come in, and they
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
reduced it accordingly.
anything else? Ms. Horace? Ms. Martin?
Thank you.
Oh, Missy, I just.
Thanks, Miss.
Oh, no, Dee Dee.
Oh, another question.
Oh, sorry, Dee Dee.
In 3045, in building maintenance, building and ground maintenance, there are fairly substantial reductions, and particularly in repair, building repair and services. With all of the, added outdoor time the community's giving to Wolf Park, is it wise to cut back on that?
Well, if I could just clarify, I mean, that $8,000 reduction is across that entire building and ground maintenance line. There's, not, I mean, that could be used for any of those items there. I don't, I think it was just a way of allocating them across. But I think, the 10,000 was something that we thought was a reasonable starting point based on 3-year history. But Missy, feel free to
Yeah, no, we
elaborate.
figured we were gonna give it a shot, try to work with, and you look at the trends from the past years, we didn't always use it all. My staff is great, they're handymen, sometimes they fix things in-house, so.
Sometimes the fact that Monroe continues to make do is not always the best thing. I just hate to see that cut back, because building repair service, that's so important to what you do. Just a comment rather than a question. Thank you.
Anything else of Ms. Norris? Otherwise, thank you. We're going on to the police, tab 25, page 118.
Okay. So, and another department that I can't say enough about in terms of the retaining such critical functions in such difficult times, and the entire department, I mean, has just stepped up admirably, and can't say enough about it. So, and again, a very detailed budget from the chief. I'll let you guys get into it, so.
Okay, questions for Chief Salvatore? Aguilar?
Thank you guys for everything, for keeping us safe. Thank you for learning how to. My question for you is overtime.
Yes.
Have we cut back in overtime with less people on the roads? I notice all the numbers are down, all the traffic stops, everything is down except for, I think there was one that was up, on vehicles, of course.
We got, basically, it's relatively flat this year, but we still have to maintain the same minimum staffing for
Sure.
the same scheduling of the officers we have. So it's not really reducing the actual amount budgeted, so we still have vacation time and things like that. There are a few sicknesses. We've been very fortunate with COVID. Our officers have really exercised a lot of personal protection, not only in the equipment they wear, but the way they go about interacting with each other. Our roll calls have been abbreviated. We've staggered so many shifts that we start at all different hours so that we don't have groups of officers congregating in the building. So in that respect, they've been very healthy, and we've had limited sick outs because of anything to do with this virus. But the overtime, we still have vacations at times and comp time that requires some overtime.
Okay. That, and I also had a question about the line 3390, the operating expense. I noticed that it's gone up over the last 3 years from in the 40,000s to now over 80?
A lot of that
Describing
is
that.
attributed to the technology. A lot of the licensing that we have annually, it goes up every year. And we, as you know, in this day and age, we have to acquire more technology just to do our job.
Yeah.
Also, some of that's been attributed to academy charges, whereas a few years back, we didn't pay anything for a basic training academy.
Yeah.
And they started implementing, the state implemented a tuition, and now that tuition's been gradually increasing. So we've had the budget for that.
Okay.
Those are the primary drivers for that.
Okay.
Some of the other expenses are just increasing.
Okay, so that's all I had. Thank you, ma'am.
Anything else of the chief or the captain?
Madam Chair?
First, Mr. Mauer, then Mr. Formicella. Mr. Mauer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Chief, for being here. There's 3 lines that I wanted to talk about. 2 we can at the same time. Line 385, the police office expense, and line 505, the police safety equipment. Obviously, trended way down this year, it looks like, and will come in well under budget, which makes sense considering. Is there any way to utilize some of those funds to pre-purchase and decrease the burden for next year?
Those funds often are expended for the most part in the second part of the fiscal year. That's why they show balances that are so high now. If we do it annually, it's not the latter part of the year anyways. So that's when we do stock up on the supplies. And really, the virus and the reduction in some of the activities we normally engage in will briefly, it won't really affect these budget lines. For example, safety equipment, that's an account where we take a lot of our medical supplies, which we've had to use a little bit more lately, but it's also our ammunition account for both training and duty ammunition. It's where we acquire some of the taser rounds, both for training and for active rounds in the tasers. And it's also where we get our barricades, our traffic cones, and the tape, etc. And it's the account where we get our Narcan for the medical cause where we go on for overdoses. So it's a very heavily itemized account, and these kind of things we're using all the time.
So you expect to utilize the remaining approximately $28,000 for safety equipment for this year and $8,000 of office expenses for this year?
In the office expense, same thing. We usually start resupplying in the latter part of the year. I expect we use it.
Okay, and the other line that I wanted to talk about was 516, the training line. Looking back through the years, this tends to come in under. I don't want to decrease that because I think training is so important, but just more of a request than a question of, and we have seen some new training ideas come through, which is great, but just I'd like to see on a more consistent basis that fund, that line item getting utilized to its amount. So,
well, you know, last year we lost basically a quarter of the fiscal year. Everything shut down. We had things scheduled last year, so there was a fund balance last year. This year, again, nobody expected this virus to impact the operations, the economy, the society the way it has. A lot of the training, especially anything in person, has been canceled. And, you know, nobody expected it to last. Again, like I said, a lot of conferences were not put on, so therefore we didn't attend them. Hopefully that's going to open up very soon. But also affecting training is the fact that the state continually cuts back on what used to be provided by our post-consul police academy, basically. They've been cutting back year after year. I really worry that, especially with this virus, they're almost shutting down, in my opinion. All they're basically doing for us now is certification of officers. And I'm thinking this is going to continue. Therefore, we've had to go out and basically get vendors to provide some of the training that used to be provided by Post free of charge. Or if Post offers it, they now charge tuitions, which they didn't charge years ago, which for the last 5 or 6 years, they've been charging tuitions for our officers to attend. You know, we're being certified to perform the state's business. they're now charging us more for it. So when this state does open up again, we're going to need training, and we're going to need a lot more, probably than what we're budgeting.
I appreciate that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And like I said, that's why I don't want to cut anything there. I just want to know that you're going to use it, and the fact that you're stating not only will we use that, but we may need more is actually something that I find very comforting, and that you guys use your discretion. And I, for one, invite you to, if there are training needs, come to this council, come to the Board of Finance, let us know, because it's such an important line item there. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all that you've done this past year and beforehand, and all you guys will continue to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the chief or captain? Mrs. Martin?
Yeah, I have two on animal control and park ranger.
My strong point.
Yeah, that's Kelly, right?
I said, Captain.
Depends on the animal, which one gets the animal? Am I reading a reduction in salary?
Salary, there. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's the part-time procedure.
No, not the part-time. Actually, the part-time is increased, but is there
What page is this?
an explanation for the reduction?
Can I answer that question?
Please?
We spiked out the overtime separate.
That's right.
We'll do
Are you
it.
talking about regular?
What Ron is saying is the,
Yeah, what line are we on?
031.
with the third line, AC overtime, you'll see
0015.
Yeah. There's a few departments where we did that to better capture overtime that was being commingled with salary.
Okay, got it.
That's right. The previous year, we had it all in.
Yep.
Okay,
We did a similar thing in Public Works, and I think maybe one other.
yes. Okay, not a problem. Got it.
Thanks, Ron.
A long time ago, I forgot all about that.
Any more questions for the chief or captain? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at the.
Before you adjourn, can I
Sure.
have the floor, just two,
Thank you, guys.
thanks, Chief. Captain, if you could hang for 1 minute, just in case there's extra questions. So I wanted to address the other questions that Councilmember Mauer had last night, to see if we can take a couple of departments off the list for, okay. So one was emergency management, and the first line that was questioned was office expense. And in speaking with the captain, who, as everyone knows, is also our emergency management director, and I can't say enough about what he's done this year, so I'd be remiss if I didn't make that comment before we go on. So in the current year and the past year, I mean, these are all COVID anomalies where CERT has been extremely active, but it's all being captured as COVID expenses. There's a year prior where the town of Trumbull picked up a substantial part of the cost of the CERT training.
They were trying to implement their own CERT program.
Right, so.
This is a guide.
Right, so we were benefit from that 1 year kind of arrangement where we were helping them out, and as a result, they were covering the cost. If you go back prior to that, the normal range in this account is from $700 to $1,200. So the 1,000 is in line with a normal range. And I think, if we were able to get to the point where we could conduct the normal CERT train, I mean, when's the last time we, now at this point?
It's been 2 years.
Yeah, so we need to do CERT classes. There's probably this pent up demand like EMS where we need to probably do more of it and have those meetings. So in our discussions, we would not be comfortable with lowering that. The other line was the operating expense line, and you had asked if that was a new expense, that 3750. So there was nothing in prior years. So that line is actually our town's share of the maintenance of a regional communication system. which all the towns in Region 1 have, which we do utilize from time to time. It is a very valuable system to have. The anomaly that occurred in prior years, those costs were being captured by grants at the regional level, and they were paying for that first year of maintenance. When it became responsibilities of the towns, quite frankly, what happened in the first is they never invoiced us. The fiduciary was the city of Stamford. We never got an invoice, and like, oh well, too late. This year, unfortunately, we did get, quite coincidentally, Captain White got an invoice today for this year, which we're actually gonna have to cover it probably out of office expense because it's higher than $37.50.
Yeah, so did Councilman Mauer jinx us now?
Yeah, right. And the amount for fiscal year, they gave us an amount for fiscal year 22 to budget for, which is 7654. So I'm actually would ask that council entertain at the appropriate time when you make motions to actually increase this line 7654.
Cover the whole thing.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, to cover the whole, yeah, to cover it.
To
Yeah.
fully cover that cost, yes.
Anything else, mister?
And the 3750 in the past was based upon number from whatever, 2 years ago when they first started this, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Selectman. That does answer my questions, and I'm satisfied that I wouldn't need to have you back to answer any other questions. And I certainly think it is appropriate to entertain a motion at the time that we do motions to increase that line item 390 to 7654 to make sure that we properly account for that.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you very much.
The other question you had was related to the health department and office expenses there. And so there is some information here in terms of, in looking at how that was budgeted, there was some unknowns relative to some of the toner charges, which were a huge component of this line. And there was a lot of flyers and color printing and stuff that was being planned, and they weren't sure the first year how much that was going to run. The long story short, we have other printers available for a lot of that color activity, and we can reduce their toner expenditure down by $795.
Thank you very much. That satisfies my questions on that line. I'll make that motion at the appropriate time, and I see no reason to call health in to further discuss the budget unless other council members have a need.
Great.
Okay, so
I have nothing else.
So I'm adjourning the meeting at 7:30 PM. See you next Monday, 6 o'clock again.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a good evening, everybody.